Chosen one, I will teach you. I repeat, I will teach you. You are not here by accident. This moment is not random, and this message did not find you by chance. Heaven itself has aligned this exact second because you are standing at the edge of something sacred. A shift, a breakthrough, a supernatural wealth miracle that has been closer than you realize. Chosen one, you have prayed for years. You believed in God. You read the scriptures. You followed the rituals. You did what you were taught was right. Yet deep inside you have felt the frustration, spiritually tired, emotionally stretched, financially delayed, and unsure why nothing seemed to move. You whispered prayers that felt like they vanished into silence, wondering if God heard you or if you were missing something no one ever explained. Anointed one, hear this clearly. The problem was never that God did not answer. The problem is that you were never taught how Jesus prayed before every wealth miracle. You were taught to pray from the outside, but Jesus prayed from within, from alignment, from authority, from the place where heaven and earth meet. If you listen to the end of this message, you will understand the prayer they stopped teaching, and you will find rest, clarity, and divine alignment returning to your spirit. Stay with me. Subscribe so we remain connected. Comment 777 as a sign you are chosen. And write the city you live in, because the wealth miracle rising toward you is about to find its address. Chosen one. Let's slow this moment down. There is nothing you need to prove here, nothing you need to perform, nothing you need to get right. Just breathe and let your shoulders drop. This is not a lesson to master. This is a place to rest into something that has been holding you longer than you realize. You have prayed for a long time, not casually, not carelessly. You prayed with sincerity, with faith, with effort. You believed that if you followed the pattern, said the word, stayed faithful, something would eventually shift. And when it didn't, you didn't stop believing in God. You started questioning yourself, quietly, gently, sometimes in the middle of the night when no one else could hear it. You wondered why the prayers felt heavy, why the answers felt distant, why your inner world and outer life seemed out of sync. Here is something that needs to be said softly, not forcefully. Jesus did not pray the way you were taught to pray, and that realization is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. When Jesus stood outside the tomb of Lazarus, there was no desperation in his voice, no bargaining, no anxiety about timing. He didn't ask heaven to move. He rested in something already settled. He lifted his eyes and spoke gratitude as though the answer had already arrived. Not because he was pretending, because he was aligned. The miracle had already taken shape in the unseen before anything shifted in the visible. Anointed one, this is important not as a concept, but as a relief. Jesus wasn't trying to get God's attention. He wasn't trying to convince the Father to care. He was standing inside a connection that was already intact. And from that place, power flowed naturally, quietly, without strain. If you look gently across the moments before his miracles, a pattern begins to reveal itself, not a formula, but a rhythm. Before provision multiplied, before healing moved, before impossible doors opened, Jesus withdrew. He stepped away from noise. He allowed the outer world to fall quiet long enough for something deeper to come forward. Not effort, not intensity, alignment. There is a kind of alignment that doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calm, almost ordinary, but it carries weight. When Jesus fed the multitudes, he didn't rush into action. He looked up not to ask, but to settle. When he walked on water, he had already been alone with God. When healing flowed through him, it wasn't forced. It moved because he was already positioned where power could pass through without obstruction. Chosen one. You were never broken for struggling to pray the way you were taught. You were simply trying to reach God from the outside instead of resting into the place where God already dwells. When Jesus spoke about prayer, he didn't point outward, he pointed inward. He spoke of an inner room, a hidden place, a treasury not made of walls or silence, but of presence. This wasn't about finding a quieter house or a better time of day. It was about returning to the part of you that exists before fear starts speaking, before lack starts narrating your life, before the mind begins negotiating outcomes. This is where things soften. The instruction to close the door was never about shutting out distractions in the usual sense. It was about gently closing the door on the version of yourself that feels it must ask, convince, strive, or earn. The version that believes heaven is far away and must be reached through effort. The Father was never distant. The distance was created by noise. Most people were never taught how to go inward. They were taught how to talk, how to ask, how to repeat. But thinking about God is not the same as resting where God is present, and that small difference explains so much of the exhaustion you've carried. The miracles didn't stop because God stopped listening. They slowed because the doorway inward was forgotten. I want to speak personally for a moment, not as a teacher, but as someone who has lived this. There were seasons when I prayed constantly and felt nothing shift. I believed deeply, yet something always felt slightly out of reach. I thought the problem was faith or discipline or worthiness. It wasn't. It was orientation. I was facing outward, trying to reach upward when the invitation was always inward. When I finally stopped trying to make prayer happen and simply allowed myself to be still, no agenda, no words, no request, something unexpected occurred. Not fireworks, not visions, just a sense of being held. And from that place, clarity came without force. Direction arrived without panic. Provision unfolded without the usual anxiety attached to it. This is where wealth miracles are born, not from striving, but from coherence. When alignment is restored, the invisible reorganizes itself around you. The future stops feeling like something you must chase. It begins to meet you where you are. Jesus spoke in past tense, not to impress heaven, but because from alignment, time collapses. What is already settled in the unseen simply waits for the outer world to catch up. Chosen one. Wealth is not attracted by desperation. It responds to source. And source is accessed when you stop operating from separation. The outer world mirrors the state you are resting in, not the words you are repeating. When you are still outside the door, life reflects lack, urgency, delay. When you rest inside, movement becomes quieter but more certain. Doors open without noise. Provision arrives without announcement. Alignment replaces effort. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about setting aside the version of yourself that has been trying too hard for too long. The ego that believes it must manage outcomes. The voice that fears nothing will change unless it intervenes. When that voice rests, something older and wiser takes its place. Jesus called this the kingdom, not a destination, but a state of being. A consciousness that can be entered now, not after death, not after perfection, now. And this is where I want to pause gently, not to end anything, but to let this settle. You do not need to understand all of this immediately. You do not need to remember every word. Something deeper than your mind is already responding. Let yourself stay here for a moment. Nothing needs to be fixed right now. Nothing needs to be decided. You are not late. You are not behind. You are being reintroduced to a place you never truly left. And from this place, everything that has felt delayed will begin to realign in its proper time. Chosen one, stay with the quiet that is forming inside you now. There is no rush to move forward. no pressure to reach a conclusion. This space you are touching is not something you create, it is something you remember. And remembering takes softness, not effort. So many people think Jesus withdrew because he was tired, but it was never about exhaustion. It was about orientation. He stepped away from the crowd not to escape people, but to return to alignment. He wasn't recovering strength, he was restoring coherence. And every time he did, life responded differently around him. There is a subtle but powerful truth here that can bring you relief. Alignment always comes before authority. Not authority over others, but authority in life. The kind where things no longer resist you the way they used to. Where provision stops feeling like something you must chase and starts feeling like something that meets you. When Jesus went into solitude, nothing visibly changed at first. No lightning, no announcement, but something within him settled. And from that settled place, words carried weight, actions carried clarity, timing unfolded naturally. That is the difference between living from effort and living from source. You may recognize the opposite feeling, the tightness, the constant inner commentary, the sense that if you stop thinking, stop planning, stop asking, everything might fall apart. That voice has been loud for a long time. It learned to be loud because it thought it had to protect you, but the inner room does not respond to force. It responds to permission. Jesus didn't push his way into that space. He entered it by becoming still enough to notice it was already there. This is why the instruction was never try harder. It was go in and close the door. Not to shut God in, but to gently set the noise aside. Most people never learn this because silence cannot be standardized. You cannot mass-produce stillness. You cannot rush interior development. And so over time, prayer became something you do instead of somewhere you rest. Words replaced presence. Performance replaced coherence, but the presence never left. Chosen one. The inner room has been waiting patiently, not judging, not disappointed, just present. When you stop speaking long enough, you begin to notice something else breathing beneath your thoughts. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't interrupt, it simply waits. And when you finally sense it, the instinct is often to rush, to ask, to clarify, to make something happen. But the invitation is to stay. Staying is where the shift happens. This is where wealth miracles quietly begin, not because you ask for them, but because you stop blocking the flow with urgency. Wealth in its truest sense is not money first. It is capacity. It is the ability to receive without fear, to hold without tension, to steward without attachment. I want to speak honestly here. I have known what it feels like to pray for provision while secretly fearing it would never come. I have also known what it feels like to finally rest inside alignment and watch provision arrive in ways that felt almost anticlimactic, simple, timely, precise. No drama, no striving, just movement. That change did not come from saying better prayers. It came from learning how to stop talking long enough to listen. When Jesus said the Father dwells within, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was pointing to a lived experience. He knew what it felt like to move through life as a vessel rather than a negotiator. He wasn't trying to convince heaven. He was allowing heaven to move through him unobstructed. This is why he said the Father works through him, not for him. There is no separation in that statement, no distance, no delay. Separation is exhausting. Alignment is restful. The world responds to source, not strain. When you operate from lack of time, lack of money, lack of certainty, life mirrors that state. When you rest in coherence, life reorganizes itself around you. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. You may notice that when you are deeply calm, things tend to resolve themselves without your interference. Conversations go differently. Opportunities appear without effort. Decisions become clearer. This is not coincidence, it is alignment. Jesus spent time in the wilderness not to be tested, but to become clear. He returned knowing who he was, beyond hunger, beyond pressure, beyond identity. That clarity carried him through everything that followed. And here is the gentle truth that may bring you comfort. You do not need 40 days. You do not need a mountain. You do not need a monastery. The doorway is internal, and it opens through recognition. When you sit quietly and breathe, not to achieve anything but to arrive, you are already stepping inside. Each exhale loosens the grip of the voice that believes it must control outcomes. Each moment of stillness allows something deeper to come forward. You might feel nothing at first. That does not mean nothing is happening. It means you are becoming sensitive to a quieter frequency. A frequency that has always been there, but was drowned out by urgency. This is where patience becomes a form of faith. Not patience as waiting for something to happen, but patience as allowing what is already present to reveal itself. The nervous system learns slowly. It needs repetition, safety, consistency. That is why the inner room opens gradually. And when it does, prayer changes without effort. It stops being something you do to God and becomes something you move from. Your words, when they come, are no longer anxious. They are declarative, grounded, aligned. They carry less emotion and more authority. This is why Jesus could speak calmly into chaos, why storms listened, why bodies responded, why provision multiplied. Not because he forced reality to obey, but because he was no longer divided within himself. Division weakens power. Coherence amplifies it. You were never meant to live divided, one part of you believing, another part doubting, one part praying, another part fearing. The inner room is where those fragments reunite, where will and trust become one movement again. Chosen one. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling tired of asking. That tiredness is wisdom knocking. It is the signal that something deeper is ready to emerge. Let yourself honor that signal. You are not being asked to abandon prayer. You are being invited to rest into it, to let prayer become a state rather than an activity, a posture rather than a performance. And as you do, something very gentle but very real begins to happen. You stop chasing outcomes. Outcomes begin to follow alignment. You stop fearing delay. Timing begins to reveal its intelligence. You stop worrying about provision. Provision begins to organize itself around your life, not because you deserve it more than others, but because you are no longer in the way. This is not about becoming holy. It is about becoming available. Available to a flow that has always been moving. Available to a presence that has never withdrawn. Available to a wealth that begins internally and expresses externally, naturally, quietly, in its own time. Stay here for a moment longer. Let this land beneath your thoughts. Nothing needs to be done right now. Just allow yourself to recognize what has been waiting patiently for you to stop striving long enough to notice it. Chosen one. There is a tenderness that begins to emerge when you stay in this space long enough. It may feel unfamiliar at first, almost vulnerable, because so much of your life has been shaped by effort. Effort to survive, effort to believe, effort to keep going when nothing around you reflected the prayers you carried inside. But this tenderness is not weakness. It is the softening that happens when you are no longer bracing against life. Most people assume that power comes from intensity. Jesus showed something entirely different. Power came from surrender, from stillness, from being so deeply aligned that action no longer carried resistance. When he spoke, it wasn't charged with urgency. It was calm, settled, inevitable. This is what happens when the inner room becomes familiar. You stop experiencing yourself as someone reaching toward God and begin experiencing yourself as someone moving with God. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Life stops feeling like a negotiation. You are no longer trying to convince the universe to cooperate. You are participating in something already unfolding. This is why wealth miracles in the life of Jesus never felt desperate. Provision arrived when needed without panic. Sometimes it came through unexpected sources. Sometimes it multiplied in ordinary moments. But it always arrived from a place of alignment, not anxiety. And this matters deeply for you, chosen one, because anxiety is one of the greatest blockages to receiving. Not because God withholds, but because fear tightens the nervous system. It narrows perception. It keeps you locked in future projections instead of present availability. When Jesus said the kingdom is within, he wasn't offering comfort. He was offering access. Access to a state where fear loosens its grip and trust becomes embodied, not conceptual. There is a moment many people encounter when they first touch this inner stillness. The mind grows restless. It asks, is this it? Am I doing this right? Shouldn't something be happening? That voice is familiar. It has been running your inner world for a long time. But instead of fighting it, you can simply notice it. Let it speak without following it. This is what Jesus meant by closing the door, not silencing thoughts, but no longer identifying with them. As you rest there, something shifts in how you experience yourself. You are no longer the voice narrating your fears. You are the awareness listening to them. And that awareness is calm, steady, unmoved. This is where authority begins, not authority over circumstances, but authority over inner turbulence. And when inner turbulence settles, the outer world responds differently. I want to ground this in real life because this is not mystical theory. There have been moments when I stood at the edge of financial uncertainty, when logic said, prepare for loss, tighten everything, brace for impact. And there were moments when I did exactly that, and life mirrored the contraction. But there were other moments when I chose to rest instead of panic, not irresponsibly, but inwardly. I stopped rehearsing worst-case scenarios. I stopped pleading for outcomes. I simply stayed present. And in those moments, clarity came. Not dramatic answers, but next steps. A conversation, a connection, an idea, something small that led to something larger. Provision often arrives quietly, not as rescue, but as redirection. When Jesus recognized miracles instead of asking for them, he was acknowledging something already true. He was speaking from agreement, not desire. Desire implies lack. Agreement implies alignment. This is why he could speak to storms, and they listened. Storms respond to coherence. Chaos dissolves in the presence of order. Your life too has been listening to the state you live from. If you live from fear, life echoes fear. If you live from alignment, life echoes support. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently. This is where surrender becomes practical. It is not passive, it is deeply active. It requires trust, not trust as belief, but trust as nervous system regulation. Trust that allows you to stay present without grasping for control. When you sit in stillness and allow the breath to move without interference, you are teaching your body that it is safe. And when the body feels safe, perception widens, options appear, creativity returns, timing reveals itself. This is why Jesus returned from solitude, clear, not confused, grounded, not scattered. He knew when to speak and when to stay silent. He knew when to act and when to wait. Waiting in alignment is not stagnation, it is incubation. You may have been in seasons where nothing seemed to move, where progress felt invisible, where you questioned whether anything was happening at all. Those seasons were not wasted, they were forming capacity. Capacity to hold what is coming without collapsing under its weight. Wealth without inner coherence becomes pressure. Influence without inner grounding becomes distortion. Jesus understood this. That is why alignment always preceded expansion. The inner room is not about escaping the world, it is about returning to it from a different center. When you begin to live from this center, something remarkable happens. You stop overreacting, you stop rushing decisions, you stop attaching your worth to outcomes. And paradoxically, outcomes improve. This is not because you stopped caring, it is because you stopped clinging. Clinging creates friction, release creates flow. Jesus did not cling to results. He trusted the movement of the Father within him. That trust allowed him to move freely, speak freely, give freely. You are being invited into that same freedom, not to imitate Jesus externally, but to inhabit the state he lived from internally. There may be a part of you that worries, if I stop trying, will everything fall apart? That part learned to survive by effort. It does not know rest yet. Be gentle with it. Do not force it to change. Let it witness something new. As you continue to return to stillness, that part will begin to relax. It will see that life continues, that support arrives, that you are not abandoned when you stop striving. This is where faith becomes experiential. Faith is not believing something will happen. Faith is resting in the presence that already holds you, and from that rest action arises naturally, without fear attached to it. Chosen one. This is how the inner room reshapes your relationship with wealth. Money stops being something you chase to feel safe. It becomes a tool that flows through safety already established within you. When inner safety is present, you make clearer choices. You attract healthier opportunities. You recognize misalignment faster. You say no without guilt and yes without fear. This is not because you are special. It is because you are aligned. And alignment is available to anyone willing to slow down enough to recognize it. Stay here. Let this settle deeper than thought. You are not behind. You are not late. You are learning to live from a place that has been quietly preparing you for everything that is now beginning to unfold. Chosen one. There is a moment that arrives quietly, often without announcement, when you realize you are no longer searching the way you used to. The questions that once pressed against your chest begin to loosen. Not because every answer has appeared, but because the urgency behind the questions has softened. This is not resignation. This is integration. When you begin to live from the inner room, life stops feeling like a series of obstacles you must overcome and starts feeling like a conversation you are participating in. You listen more, you react less. You notice subtleties you once rushed past. And in those subtleties, guidance lives. Jesus moved with this kind of attentiveness. He did not rush toward opportunity. Opportunity found him. He did not force timing. Timing revealed itself. This is why his life had a sense of inevitability rather than struggle. Even opposition did not derail him because his center was not located in circumstances. This is important for you to hear, especially if your journey has included disappointment, delay, or moments where you felt overlooked. Alignment does not mean the absence of challenge. It means challenge no longer defines you. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop measuring your life against outcomes. When wealth has not yet arrived, when doors have not yet opened, when recognition feels slow, it is easy to believe something is wrong. But peace reveals something deeper. Preparation often looks like stillness from the outside. The inner room is not dramatic. It does not shout. It does not demand attention, it simply holds. And when you return there again and again, something in you begins to stabilize. You stop swinging between hope and disappointment. You stop attaching your sense of self to what happens next. This stability is not passive, it is deeply powerful. I want to ground this in something real. There were seasons in my own life where everything seemed paused, projects stalled, finances felt uncertain, plans refused to move forward. I kept asking, what am I missing? But looking back, I can see that those seasons were not empty. They were narrowing my focus, removing distractions, teaching me how to listen beneath the noise of ambition. When movement returned, it did not come with chaos. It came with clarity. This is how wealth alignment often unfolds. Not as sudden noise, but as quiet readiness. You find yourself prepared for opportunities you could not have handled before. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. Jesus spoke about seeds for a reason. Growth happens underground. It cannot be rushed without damaging the root. The inner room is where roots deepen. As you stay in this space, you may notice old patterns loosening. The impulse to control outcomes begins to fade. The need for constant reassurance softens. You begin to trust timing not as an abstract idea, but as something you can feel. This trust changes how you move through the world. You stop forcing conversations. You stop overcommitting. You stop saying yes out of fear. And as a result, your life becomes less crowded, but more effective. This is not withdrawal from life. It is refinement. Jesus did not isolate himself permanently. He returned to people, to problems, to responsibility, but he returned different, grounded, clear, unattached. That difference made all the difference. You may find that as you live from this center, some things naturally fall away. Relationships that were built on anxiety, opportunities that required compromise, habits that were fueled by restlessness. This is not loss. It is alignment asserting itself. And here is something that may surprise you. Alignment does not feel like striving toward holiness. It feels like relief. Relief from pretending. Relief from performing. Relief from carrying burdens that were never yours to hold. When Jesus said his burden was light, he was describing the state of alignment, not the absence of responsibility. Responsibility carried from alignment does not crush you, it supports you. This is where wealth shifts from being a source of fear to a channel of expression. When money arrives in a life that is not aligned, it amplifies insecurity. When it arrives in a life rooted in stillness, it amplifies generosity, clarity, and purpose. This is why inner work always precedes outer expansion. Not as punishment, but as protection. You are being protected from receiving something before you are ready to hold it without losing yourself. As you rest in the inner room, something subtle happens to your sense of identity. You stop defining yourself by labels: successful, struggling, chosen, overlooked. You begin to experience yourself as presence first. From that place, roles become flexible, outcomes become information rather than identity. This flexibility is powerful. It allows you to adapt without fear, to pivot without panic, to release without regret. Jesus could walk away from crowds without guilt. He could engage deeply without attachment. He was not driven by approval or threatened by rejection. That freedom made him effective. And that freedom is available to you. You do not need to convince yourself of it. You only need to continue returning to the space where it is already true. Each time you sit quietly and allow stillness to hold you, you are practicing trust. Not trust that something specific will happen, but trust that you are held even when nothing happens. This trust changes how you experience time. Waiting no longer feels like delay. It feels like ripening. There may be moments when impatience resurfaces, when fear whispers that you are falling behind, when comparison tries to pull you back into old patterns. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. When that happens, do not fight it. Return gently. Breathe. Remember where your center is. The door to the inner room is never locked. It closes only when you forget where you are standing. Chosen one. Wealth miracles do not always announce themselves with sudden noise. Sometimes they arrive as stability, sometimes as peace, sometimes as the right conversation at the right moment, sometimes as the courage to say no, which makes room for a better yes. These are not small things. They are the building blocks of a life aligned with Source. And as this alignment deepens, you may notice that gratitude begins to arise naturally, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with the present. Gratitude from alignment is quiet. It does not demand evidence. It flows from coherence. Jesus thanked the Father before the miracle appeared because gratitude was not a response to outcomes. It was a reflection of union. Union removes urgency. Urgency creates noise. Noise obscures guidance. As the noise fades, guidance becomes obvious. Stay here. Let the simplicity of this settle. You are not being asked to do more. You are being invited to rest deeper. And from that rest, everything that has felt heavy will begin to rearrange itself in ways that no amount of effort could ever accomplish. Chosen one. There comes a point where rest stops feeling like something you are practicing and begins to feel like somewhere you live. It does not happen all at once. It arrives quietly in small moments you might almost overlook. A calmer response where there used to be tension, a pause where there used to be panic, a sense of trust where there used to be constant calculation. This is how alignment matures. When the inner room becomes familiar, you no longer have to enter it deliberately. You begin to carry it with you. It follows you into conversations, decisions, waiting rooms, ordinary days. And from this carried stillness, your life starts to reorganize itself in subtle but unmistakable ways. You may notice that you are no longer driven by the same urgency to fix everything. Problems still arise, but they do not hijack your nervous system the way they once did. You listen more before responding. You allow space before acting. This space is not indecision, it is wisdom. Jesus moved with this wisdom. He did not respond to every demand. He did not heal every person immediately. He did not explain himself to those who misunderstood him. He trusted the rhythm of alignment more than the pressure of expectation. This is a freedom many people never experience. They live reacting instead of responding. But when you live from the inner room, reaction gives way to discernment. Discernment is not suspicion, it is clarity, and clarity is one of the greatest forms of wealth. There are opportunities that look like blessings, but carry misalignment. There are doors that open too early and extract more than they give. When you are anxious, these doors are difficult to recognize. When you are aligned, you feel the difference immediately, not as fear, but as a quiet sense of not this. Jesus trusted that sense. That is why he could walk away from temptation without struggle. That is why he could choose timing without regret. He did not need to analyze everything. He felt alignment and followed it. This is how inner rest protects you. Many people believe that wealth will bring peace. Jesus showed the opposite order. Peace comes first. Wealth follows as expression, not compensation. When peace is missing, money becomes something you grasp to fill a gap. When peace is present, money becomes a tool that moves freely through your life. This is why anxiety around finances softens as you live from the inner room. Not because numbers magically disappear, but because fear no longer dominates your perception. You see options you couldn't see before. You hear guidance you previously drowned out with worry. I want to speak honestly here. There were times when I thought clarity would come through thinking harder, through planning better, through pushing myself to figure everything out. But clarity came when I stopped forcing answers and allowed myself to sit in uncertainty without panic. Uncertainty held calmly becomes openness, and openness is where provision often enters. Provision rarely arrives through the channels you expect. It comes through conversations you did not plan, through ideas that feel simple rather than brilliant, through shifts that seem small at first but alter everything over time. Jesus multiplied bread and fish, not gold and silver. Provision met the need of the moment, not the fantasy of excess, and yet it was always enough, often more than enough. This teaches something important about wealth miracles. They are not always about accumulation. They are about sufficiency aligned with purpose. When you are aligned, you have what you need when you need it. And over time, that sufficiency compounds into abundance. Abundance built this way does not destabilize you. It strengthens you. As you live from rest, you may notice that your relationship with time changes. You stop rushing the future. You stop resenting the present. You become more attentive to what is actually happening now. And in that attentiveness, opportunities reveal themselves naturally. Jesus often noticed what others missed. A small offering, a quiet faith, a moment of readiness. Alignment sharpens perception. Perception is everything. When you are aligned, you recognize when to act and when to wait. Waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels like listening. Acting no longer feels forced. It feels like flow. This flow is not constant excitement. It is steady movement. There may still be days when nothing obvious happens, days that feel ordinary, even dull. Do not mistake these days for stagnation. Roots grow in quiet soil. Integration happens in ordinary time. The inner room does its deepest work when you are not watching for results. This is where trust deepens. Trust is not believing everything will go your way. Trust is knowing you will remain aligned regardless of how things unfold. That knowing brings resilience. It allows you to move through disappointment without collapse and success without inflation. Jesus did not lose himself in praise or persecution. His center remained intact. That is real power. And this power expresses itself gently. It does not need to dominate. It does not need to prove itself. It simply moves. As you continue living from this place, you may find that your desires begin to change. Not because you suppress them, but because alignment refines them. What once felt urgent may lose its grip. What once felt small may gain meaning. This refinement is not loss, it is focus. When desire is aligned, it no longer pulls you out of the present. It guides you forward without tension. It becomes intention rather than craving. Jesus desired the will of the Father not because he denied himself, but because alignment made that desire natural. Desire and purpose became one movement. This is the invitation for you. You are not being asked to abandon ambition. You are being invited to root it in stillness. Ambition rooted in fear exhausts you. Ambition rooted in alignment carries you. There is a dignity that comes with this way of living, a groundedness that others can feel without you saying a word. People may not know why they trust you, but they do. They sense coherence. Coherence attracts collaboration. It attracts opportunity. It attracts resources. Not because you are trying to attract anything, but because you are no longer repelling support with anxiety. This is how the outer world begins to mirror the inner one. Chosen one. Nothing you have walked through has been wasted. The delays, the disappointments, the seasons of silence, they have all been teaching your nervous system how to rest in uncertainty. That skill is rare, and it is essential for carrying what is coming without losing yourself. You do not need to rush toward the next chapter. You are already standing in the doorway. Continue returning to stillness. Continue listening beneath the noise. Continue allowing alignment to shape your responses. Wealth miracles born from this place do not steal your peace. They deepen it. And as this peace deepens, you may begin to realize something quietly profound. You are no longer asking life to give you permission to rest. You are resting because you know you are held. From that knowing, everything else finds its proper place. Chosen one. There is a quiet confidence that begins to rise when you no longer need life to reassure you at every step. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It feels more like steadiness than certainty, and yet it carries you further than force ever could. When alignment becomes your resting place, you stop asking, "Is this working?" and begin noticing, "This feels right." That subtle shift changes how you interpret everything. Challenges no longer feel like signs of failure. They feel like invitations to remain grounded. Delays stop feeling like rejection. They feel like refinement. Jesus lived from this confidence, not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in union. He did not measure success by immediate results. He measured it by alignment with the Father. That alignment made him unshakable, even when misunderstood, even when opposed, even when nothing around him looked like victory. This matters for you, especially if your journey has included moments where obedience did not lead to instant reward. Alignment does not bypass difficulty. It transforms how difficulty is carried. There may be parts of your life that still feel unresolved. Finances that haven't stabilized yet. Questions about direction that remain unanswered. Relationships that feel uncertain. Alignment does not demand that all of this be resolved before peace arrives. Peace arrives first, and resolution follows in its own time. This is not denial. It is trust embodied. When you live from the inner room, you stop negotiating with fear. Fear may still appear, but it no longer dictates your decisions. You can feel uncertainty without being consumed by it. You can acknowledge desire without being driven by it. This inner freedom is what allows wealth to move through your life without controlling it. Many people are afraid of money because they associate it with loss of integrity, loss of peace, loss of self. That fear is not unfounded when money enters a life that is not aligned. But when alignment is established, first, money does not corrupt. It clarifies. It reveals what is already present. Jesus understood this. That is why he did not chase wealth, yet lacked nothing. He trusted provision as an extension of alignment, not as a substitute for it. I want to speak gently to a part of you that may still be holding tension. The part that wonders, what if I rest and nothing happens? That fear is understandable. It has learned that effort equals survival. But rest in alignment is not passivity. It is participation at a deeper level. When you stop forcing outcomes, you become available to guidance. Guidance often arrives as intuition timing or inner knowing rather than external instruction. It may not tell you the entire path. It often reveals only the next step. Jesus rarely laid out full plans. He moved step by step, guided by alignment rather than strategy. That made his path flexible, responsive, alive. As you live this way, you may notice that you no longer feel compelled to explain yourself. You stop over-justifying decisions. You stop seeking validation for choices that feel aligned. This is not arrogance. It is self-trust rooted in presence. Self-trust grows naturally from stillness. Stillness allows you to hear the quiet yes and the quiet no that fear often drowns out. Those signals become clearer the more you honor them, and as you honor them, life begins to support you in ways that feel almost conversational. You make a choice and circumstances respond. You wait and timing reveals itself. You release something and space opens. This responsiveness is not coincidence. It is coherence in motion. The world responds to coherence because coherence removes friction. When you are divided internally, life mirrors division. When you are unified, life mirrors support. This does not mean everything becomes easy. It means effort is no longer wasted. Energy flows where it is meant to go. Jesus conserved energy by remaining aligned. He did not scatter himself across every need. He allowed purpose to guide engagement. That focus amplified his impact. You may find that as you live from alignment, your energy increases even as your effort decreases. You stop draining yourself on what does not matter. You invest yourself more fully where alignment calls you. This is sustainable abundance. Abundance that does not exhaust you. Success that does not cost you your soul. Provision that does not require constant vigilance. There may be moments when old habits resurface. The urge to control, the impulse to worry, the temptation to rush. When this happens, return gently. There is no failure in forgetting. Remembering is the practice. Each return deepens the pathway. Over time, you may notice that you are less reactive to external noise. News, opinions, expectations lose some of their power over you. You become more anchored internally. This anchoring allows you to move through the world without being pulled apart by it. Jesus moved through conflict without absorbing it. He could engage without being entangled. That capacity came from alignment, and alignment is what prepares you for the kind of wealth that does not distort your values. Wealth that serves purpose rather than replacing it. You are being shaped for that kind of wealth. Not wealth as escape, but wealth as expression. Not wealth as proof, but wealth as provision. Not wealth as identity, but wealth as instrument. This shaping does not happen overnight. It unfolds as you continue choosing rest over panic, presence over projection, trust over force. There is a gentleness to this process that may surprise you. God does not rush you. Heaven does not pressure you. The invitation has always been simple: come inside, close the door, and rest. Everything else flows from there. As this way of living settles into you, you may find that gratitude arises without effort. Not gratitude because everything is perfect, but gratitude because you are no longer fighting what is. This gratitude is not performative. It is quiet appreciation for coherence itself. Jesus thanked the Father before the miracle, not because he was certain of the outcome, but because he was resting in union. Gratitude was a reflection of relationship, not result. That relationship is available to you now. You do not need to earn it. You do not need to perfect it. You only need to continue returning to the place where it is already true. Chosen one, let this be enough for now. You are not behind. You are not lacking. You are learning how to live from a center that has always been holding you. From this center, wealth will arrive in its proper form and timing. From this center, guidance will continue to unfold. From this center, you will move forward without losing yourself. Rest here, breathe here, trust the intelligence of alignment. Everything that belongs to you knows how to find you when you are no longer trying to chase it. Chosen one. Take this moment slowly. Let everything you've heard settle gently into your spirit. Nothing here was rushed and nothing was random. You have arrived at the end of this message not by chance, but because heaven timed your arrival with precision. This is your Kairos moment, the appointed intersection where alignment meets manifestation. Anointed One, a supernatural transfer is already in motion. Not something you must chase, not something you must force, but something unfolding because you are finally resting in the place where heaven can move through you without resistance. What has felt delayed was never denied. What seemed quiet was never empty. The inner room has opened, and from that place provision, clarity, and divine order are beginning to flow. Remain faithful to stillness. Remain aligned with peace. Trust what is rearranging itself beyond what your eyes can yet see. Gratitude is your posture now, not for what might come, but for what has already been set in motion. If this moment resonated with your spirit, stay connected. You are welcome to subscribe and walk this path with us. If you feel led, leave a quiet sign of faith in the comments, perhaps the city where you are standing, so this blessing knows where to find you. And if your heart feels full, share this with someone who is ready to rest rather than strive. Go now in peace, chosen one. Be still. Remain aligned. What belongs to you is already finding its way.